Hey, peace. So this video is going to deal with racism, but racism from a unique standpoint because I think as more and more people who consider black travel outside of their countries and venture into different locations, something that they don't often talk about is how, or they don't understand, is how racism plays out in expat groups. And this is specifically important because you have to understand that expat groups, these people are, this is a tribe. And so whenever you're entering a group of people, as and especially like a town or anything like that, you have to figure out your place in that location, or how are you gonna work with the expats. And one of the things about Asia, Southeast Asia, where I was at, um, the majority of the expat groups were governed or consisted primarily of Caucasians. Now, what I have noticed is that many Africans, brothers from the continent, they form their own expat groups. They really don't. And most of the time, when I was in different locations, usually wherever it was at, especially like in Vietnam or even Cambodia, um, they would occasionally deal with with some Caucasians, like brothers would date Caucasian women, but as a whole, they kind of congregated amongst themselves. They go when they would go out, they would go to a bar. You see a bunch of brothers sitting together, um, but they might have dated the locals. But the bottom line is they didn't deal too heavily with Caucasians. And I'm not saying that is wrong, but what happens is if you are going to be a black person in a location, especially like Asia, you have to figure out what your role will be. I've noticed a lot of brothers who maintained a lot of relationships with Caucasians would have like buddies that they kind of chilled with, and their buddies would kind of, I don't want to say mask or camouflage them or sense, but like what I noticed is in many instances where you have expat men, you have men who consider themselves black or whatever. If they have a lot of Caucasian friends, the women who are hanging around them, they'll be attracted to them or they'll be interested in them as well. I'll give you an example. Like I saw a guy when I first went to China. Because a lot, I mean, Chinese people, Chinese women are cool when it comes to race. The ones who are there, in my opinion, they're in fact Vietnamese, very open-minded. The only women I felt who were really out of it in terms of out of it mentally, just really couldn't get into brothers, but they were adapting, were Cambodian women. Rest women, Chinese, Vietnamese, uh, and then I think like Hong Kong women, kind of sort of, but that's another video. But in any event, so what happens is you have to figure out how you're going to survive in that expat role or in that circle, in that group, because the bottom line is you're a member of that clique regardless. Let's say you go to um, Bangkok, Thailand, right? By default, and they say you're going to live there for 6 months. You're a member of that community, whether you like it or not. Now, how you fit into that community is another thing. How you fit into that community overall, you have to decide. Um, but one of the things that happens is if you're going to have like a Caucasian buddies, let's say I don't know, let's say you are you study Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and you join the Brazilian Jiu Jitsu school out there. By default, probably, a lot of the guys there will be like, Caucasian guys, and so whatever group of women they kind of hang with, you'll be able to, deal with the women. So the Asian, what I'm trying to say is like, let's say there's a local Asian woman and she's not really into black men, right? The fact that you have Caucasian friends and she would see this, she would see a lot of, especially if she sees you dating Caucasian women, that's gonna trigger something, and they're gonna look at you differently. And then they'll be interested. And just like but at first they're gonna look at your skin color, okay? But by you having Caucasian friends, they tend to look at you differently. And in a sense, it's sad with Asian people, but it's almost like if you have Caucasian friends, your stock goes up there in Asia because they really start looking past your color and just like see you as an individual. So they're gonna be looking try to get a hold of you. The other aspect of like expat communities is people are still tribal, and expats collectively I feel like they need someone to point a finger at. All right, so you have to make sure whatever you do, that person is not you, because the one thing that is most important when you travel is you as an expat, especially if you are not planning on going home. Let's say you're trying to do what I did and you spend 5 years abroad or something like that. You have to maintain your reputation. This is your reputation as a person is important, because what happens is that's almost like you can burn yourself out in expat, because expat communities are very small. You have a city like Beijing, huge city, millions of people, whatever, and then the expat community is this small. All right, you go to a place like Ho Chi Minh City, huge expat community is like this, and it's so small and incestuous. It's just like you go out with one lady and she knows everybody in this group. In this group, everybody knows this person, and it's really annoying, to be honest with you. So if you can, one of the things I would do is I would try to plan activities that had no expats. Like when I was in Taoyuan, Taiwan, um, just not like, because sometimes you don't want to be bothered with like racism or trying to placate to Caucasians. One of the things that I would do is that, and I'm not trying to say Caucasians are bad people, whatever, or nothing like that. It's just sometimes you want to break from that community. What I would do is find like opportunities, activities that didn't involve them. So I would go out on my own and find activities. Like when I was in Taiwan, I've mentioned before on this channel, like I like salsa dancing or social dancing, or any kind of like dancing, ballet or whatever. Like I like to study dance. Um, so I got on Google and started doing research and finding things to do. And then I just went around in like a neighborhood in Taoyuan, Taiwan, and started asking people. And like I would use Google Translate, and the people would they would try to talk to me, and they would help me, and they helped me find teachers. I even found like where they offered what was it I was interested in at the time, Taekwondo, just to have something to do. And I would go out and look for these opportunities. So what I'm trying to say is sometimes, let's say you're in a location, plan activities that don't involve a lot of your coworkers, because you don't want to be, you want to maintain relationships with them. You want to be cordial and you want to help them because they'll be able to help you. But what you don't want to do is be in a situation where you're dependent on them for any kind of for your self-esteem and for your well-being, because that's not healthy. All right, and overall, like I said, I think there are a lot of people who travel in general who are just traveling. I think they are very adventurous people, regardless of their ethnicity and so forth. But then you do have a lot of Caucasian people. I had to say it, but many are like, and especially in a place like Southeast Asia, kind of like scavengers, and they don't want you around. All right, so gonna be traveling soon, but I'll let you all know all about that later. But probably for the next for until probably like later this year, I'll be in the United States. But later next year, I'm gonna be outie. So, but we'll talk about that later. All right.